For the first time in hundreds of years, the center of world power is changing, and it's not just between America and China. Today, the world fears the rise of a new giant, India, and the truth is no one can stop it. Now, when I say that, I don't mean fear in the sense of being afraid. I mean respect. I mean attention. I mean knowing that something big is happening. If you look around the world from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Brussels, everybody is watching India right now. And they are asking themselves one question: how is this going to change the future of the world order? India today is already the fifth largest economy on earth. Not long ago, it was behind Britain, the very country that once ruled over it. But now, India has moved ahead. And if growth continues at the current pace, if India can sustain 6 to 7% GDP growth year after year, by 2030, it is expected to become the third largest economy behind only the United States and China. It is an extraordinary achievement for a nation that was once considered a poor developing country. And let's talk about what is driving this transformation. India's IT and service sector has become the brain of the digital world. When you pick up your phone, when a company in America or Europe needs software, there is a good chance that somebody in Bengaluru or Hyderabad or Pune is behind that code. Giants like Infosys, Wipro, and Tata Consultancy are leading the way. At the same time, manufacturing is beginning to shift as costs rise in China. As global companies worry about over-reliance on Beijing, they are looking toward India. Apple is already moving part of its iPhone production to India. Tesla is negotiating to set up a factory. That is not just economics, that is geopolitics. And let's not forget the startups. India now has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. After the US and China, every year new unicorns are born in fintech, edtech, healthcare, and green energy. And behind this is a growing middle class. Hundreds of millions of people entering the consumer economy, buying cars, smartphones, homes. Global companies cannot ignore that kind of market. Now, numbers are important, but the real story of India is not just in its GDP, it's in its people. India today is the most populous country on earth with more than 1.43 billion citizens. But here is the real difference. The median age is just 28 years old. Compare that to China or the United States, where the average age is around 38. In Europe, it's even older. That means while the rest of the world is getting old, India is still young. And that youth is not just in numbers, it's in skills. Every year, India produces more than 1.5 million engineers, doctors, scientists, innovators. By 2030, 1 out of every 4 new workers in the global economy will come from India. Think about that for a moment. A quarter of the world's new workforce from one country. This manpower is also reflected in defense. India has more than 1.4 million active soldiers. It is the second largest standing army in the world. It has nuclear weapons. It has a growing navy that is projecting power into the Indian Ocean. And it has a space program that has landed near the South Pole of the moon, something only a handful of nations have achieved. But let me remind you, power alone doesn't shape the future. Leadership does. Throughout my own journey, I've learned that nations rise and fall not just because of their numbers or their weapons or even their money, but because of the vision of their leaders and the integrity of their people. That is why I put together a comprehensive leadership framework. It's not just for presidents or prime ministers. It's for teachers, entrepreneurs, community leaders, anyone who wants to learn how to build vision, communicate with impact, and lead with integrity. Whether you're in Delhi, Washington, or Nairobi, leadership is the one force that can truly change your destiny. Now let's talk about diplomacy, because this is where India has surprised the world. When you look at India's foreign policy, it doesn't simply align with one bloc. Instead, it balances relationships with everyone. With the United States, India is a strategic partner. It is part of the Quad, along with Japan and Australia, working to secure the Indo-Pacific and counter China's growing influence. India has signed defense deals with Washington worth billions of dollars. At the same time, India maintains deep ties with Russia. It buys more than 40% of its military hardware from Moscow, and since the Ukraine war, it has become one of the largest buyers of discounted Russian oil. That has helped keep Russia's economy afloat, even as Western sanctions try to isolate it. And then there is China. Relations are tense, there are border clashes along the Himalayas, there is competition for influence in Asia, in Africa, in the Indian Ocean, but at the same time, China is India's second largest trading partner. That is a complicated relationship, rivalry, and partnership in the same breath. India also has strong ties with the Gulf states for energy security and with Africa, where it is investing in infrastructure, healthcare, and technology. In many African countries, India is seen as a friendly alternative to China's Belt and Road projects. On the global stage, India is a leader in the G20 in BRICS, and it has long pushed for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. But this means it's simple. India has shown it can talk to Washington, Moscow, and Beijing all in the same week. It can balance competing interests without becoming anyone's puppet, and that is what real strategic independence looks like. Now, if we step back and look at the broader picture, we see comparisons. China, for decades, was the story of unstoppable growth. But today, China faces a slowing economy, massive debt, a property crisis, and an aging population. Its authoritarian model also faces global pushback. India, by contrast, presents itself as a democratic alternative. Messy at times, noisy at times, but still a democracy with free elections, a vibrant press, and an independent judiciary. That gives India a kind of moral weight that China lacks. The United States is still the largest economy and the most powerful military in the world, but it knows it cannot face the challenges of the 21st century alone. Climate change, terrorism, artificial intelligence, supply chains, these are global issues. And so America sees India as a natural partner, not just to balance China, but to help shape the future. Russia, meanwhile, is struggling. After invading Ukraine, it has faced sanctions, isolation, and battlefield setbacks, and yet it leans on India as a customer, a friend who will still take its oil, still buy its weapons. That gives India leverage. Africa and the Middle East are also in this equation. Both regions are rich in resources and young populations. Both are becoming battlegrounds of influence between China and India. The Gulf is critical for India's energy, and Africa is where India is investing in trade, education, and technology. But beyond the economy, beyond the manpower, beyond the diplomacy, there are hidden strengths. India has nuclear weapons. It has a space program that is now respected worldwide. Chandrayaan-3 was not just a scientific achievement. It was a statement that India belongs in the club of space powers. India is also a leader in digital technology. The UPI system, a platform for digital payments, processed more than 11 billion transactions in a single month. That is more than any other country on earth. It shows how India can leapfrog old systems and create its own solutions. In energy, India is investing heavily in renewables. It has a target of reaching 450 gigawatts of renewable capacity by 2030. It is one of the biggest investors in solar and wind power. That matters in a world fighting climate change. And then there is soft power. Bollywood films watched across the globe. Yoga practiced in homes from Los Angeles to Tokyo. An Indian diaspora of more than 18 million people who are not only citizens of other nations, but also leaders, CEOs of Microsoft, Google, IBM, and so many others. But India's rise goes even deeper than these visible achievements. Let's talk about something most people don't see. India's manufacturing sector is quietly becoming a powerhouse. Global supply chains that once ran exclusively through China are now building alternative routes through Indian factories. From textiles to electronics, from pharmaceuticals to automotive parts, Indian manufacturers are proving they can deliver quality products at competitive prices. The pharmaceutical industry tells this story perfectly. India is already the world's largest provider of generic medicines. It supplies 20% of all generic drugs globally and 60% of all vaccines. During the COVID pandemic, when the world needed vaccines urgently, India stepped up. It became the pharmacy of the world, supplying critical medicines to over 100 countries. That kind of capability doesn't happen overnight. It takes decades of building expertise, infrastructure, and trust. India's agricultural sector is also transforming in ways that will reshape global food security. India is the world's second largest producer of wheat, rice, and pulses. It feeds not just its own 1.4 billion people, but also exports food to dozens of countries. As climate change threatens food production worldwide, India's agricultural innovations in drought-resistant crops and water-efficient farming become crucial for global stability. The financial sector reveals another dimension of India's rise. Indian banks are expanding globally. The State Bank of India operates in over 30 countries. Indian financial technology companies are creating solutions that other developing nations are adopting. From mobile banking to microfinance, India is exporting financial innovation that helps lift people out of poverty worldwide. Education is where India's long-term strategy becomes clear. India has more universities than any country except the United States. It produces more engineering graduates than America and China combined. Indian institutes of technology are globally recognized for excellence. Students from across Asia, Africa, and even Europe come to study in India. This is soft power that builds relationships for decades. The entertainment industry showcases India's cultural influence. Bollywood produces more films annually than Hollywood. Indian web series are watched on Netflix and Amazon Prime by audiences worldwide. Indian music, especially Bollywood soundtracks, top charts in dozens of countries. This cultural export builds emotional connections that traditional diplomacy cannot achieve. Sports is becoming another area where India flexes its growing confidence. Cricket, where India dominates globally, generates billions in revenue and reaches audiences across multiple continents. But India is also investing in Olympic sports, building world-class training facilities and hiring international coaches. The goal is clear: to become a sporting superpower that matches its economic and political rise. The environmental sector shows India balancing development with responsibility. Yes, India is still heavily dependent on coal for energy, but it is also the world's fourth largest renewable energy producer. India has committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2070. It is investing massively in solar power, wind energy, and green hydrogen. For a developing country, this represents an extraordinary commitment to fighting climate change while growing its economy. Transportation infrastructure reveals the scale of India's ambitions. The country is building the world's largest highway network. It is constructing high-speed rail lines that will connect major cities. Indian Railways, already the world's fourth largest network, is being modernized with new trains, stations, and digital systems. This infrastructure will support economic growth for decades. India's approach to technology development differs from both America and China. Unlike America's private sector dominance or China's state-led model, India creates public-private partnerships that leverage both government resources and private innovation. This hybrid approach allows India to develop critical technologies while maintaining democratic values and market freedoms. The defense industry exemplifies this approach. India is reducing its dependence on foreign weapons by building domestic capabilities. It is designing and manufacturing fighter jets, missiles, naval vessels, and advanced radar systems. The goal is not just self-reliance, but also becoming a major weapons exporter. Countries worldwide are already buying Indian defense equipment because it offers advanced technology at affordable prices. Water management represents one of India's most critical challenges and biggest opportunities. With 18% of the world's population but only 4% of the world's water resources, India has been forced to innovate. It has built the world's largest water transfer projects, developed advanced desalination technologies, and created water recycling systems that other water-stressed nations are copying. Healthcare innovation shows how India solves problems through frugal engineering. Indian companies have developed medical devices that cost a fraction of Western alternatives while delivering similar quality. Indian hospitals perform complex surgeries at costs that are 90% lower than American hospitals. Medical tourism to India is growing rapidly as patients from wealthy countries seek affordable, high-quality healthcare. The digital revolution in India goes far beyond the famous UPI payment system. India has created a digital identity system called Aadhaar that covers over 1.3 billion people. It has built digital platforms that deliver government services directly to citizens' phones. It has created a digital lending system that provides loans to small businesses within minutes. These innovations are being studied and adopted by governments worldwide. Women's empowerment is driving significant changes in Indian society and economy. Women's participation in the workforce is increasing. Female entrepreneurs are starting companies at record rates. Women are leading major corporations, government ministries, and scientific institutions. This demographic shift adds hundreds of millions of people to India's productive capacity. Urban development is creating mega cities that will shape the 21st century. Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, and Chennai are becoming global cities comparable to New York, London, or Tokyo. But India is also building entirely new cities designed for the digital age. These smart cities integrate advanced technology with sustainable development principles. Rural development ensures that India's growth benefits everyone, not just urban populations. Digital connectivity is reaching remote villages. Banking services are available through mobile phones. Government welfare programs deliver benefits directly to rural families. This inclusive approach to development prevents the urban-rural divide that has caused problems in other rapidly growing countries. The startup ecosystem reflects India's entrepreneurial energy. Indian startups raised over $35 billion in funding in recent years. They are creating solutions for local problems that often work globally, from food delivery to education technology, from healthcare to financial services. Indian startups are competing successfully with companies from Silicon Valley. So why does the world fear India's rise? It's not fear in the sense of war. It's the recognition that India is not going to follow anyone else's script. The West worries about losing dominance. China worries about a democratic rival rising right next door. India's independence, its refusal to fully align with any one bloc, means that it plays by its own rules, and that makes it unpredictable. It challenges the old structures of power where the United States and China were expected to be the two poles. Instead, we are moving toward a multipolar world where India will stand as a center of gravity in its own right. But let's dig deeper into what this means for specific regions and countries. For Europe, India's rise represents both opportunity and challenge. European companies want access to India's massive market, but they also worry about Indian companies becoming competitors in their own markets. Take the automotive industry. Indian companies like Tata Motors have already acquired iconic European brands like Jaguar and Land Rover. Indian steel companies have bought European steel plants. This is economic power flowing in reverse from east to west. For Japan, India's rise is mostly welcome news. Japan sees India as a democratic ally in a region increasingly dominated by China. Japanese companies are investing billions in Indian infrastructure, from bullet trains to manufacturing plants. The Japan-India partnership is built on shared values and mutual respect. Both countries understand what it means to balance economic growth with cultural preservation. For Australia, India represents the future of the Asia-Pacific region. Australia's economy depends heavily on exporting resources to Asia. As India's economy grows, its hunger for Australian coal, iron ore, and agricultural products will only increase. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of Indian students study in Australian universities, creating bonds that will last for generations. For the Middle East, India is becoming an essential partner. The Gulf states need India's massive workforce and growing market. Indian workers build the skyscrapers of Dubai and Doha. Indian companies invest in Middle Eastern infrastructure projects. And as the world transitions away from oil, the Middle East sees India as a key market for renewable energy partnerships. For Africa, India offers an alternative to Chinese investment. While China builds roads and ports through its Belt and Road Initiative, India focuses on human development. Indian companies build hospitals and schools. Indian universities offer scholarships to African students. Indian doctors and engineers work across Africa, transferring skills and knowledge. This approach creates deeper, more lasting relationships. For Latin America, India represents a new source of investment and technology. Indian IT companies are setting up operations in Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. Indian pharmaceutical companies are supplying affordable medicines across the region. As Latin American countries look to diversify their economic partnerships away from dependence on the United States and China, India offers a third option. Now let's talk about what India's rise means for global institutions. The United Nations was created after World War II, when India was still a British colony. Today, India is the world's most populous democracy, but it still doesn't have a permanent seat on the Security Council. This situation cannot last. Either the UN reforms to reflect today's reality, or it becomes irrelevant. The World Trade Organization faces a similar challenge. Trade rules written decades ago don't account for India's digital economy or its service sector dominance. As India becomes a larger player in global trade, it will push for rules that reflect its interests and capabilities. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank are also adapting to India's rise. These institutions were dominated by Western countries for decades, but as India's economy grows, its voice in these organizations grows too. India is already pushing for more infrastructure lending and less emphasis on austerity policies. Climate change negotiations show how India's rise changes global dynamics. India argues that developed countries cause most historical emissions, so they should take responsibility for fixing the problem. At the same time, India commits to aggressive renewable energy targets. This position influences how other developing countries approach climate negotiations. The question then is no longer if India will rise. The question is how the world will adapt when it does. Smart countries are already building bridges with India. They understand that the future belongs to those who can work with rising powers, not against them. For individuals, India's rise creates opportunities and challenges. If you work in technology, healthcare, education, or any field where India is becoming dominant, you need to understand Indian markets and culture. If you're an entrepreneur, India offers both a massive market and fierce competition. If you're a student, learning about India and its languages could open doors to opportunities. Because in the end, the rise of India is not just India's story. It is a story about how billions of people with resilience and determination can reshape the world. It is a story about democracy succeeding in the world's most diverse society. It is a story about ancient wisdom adapting to modern challenges. And it is a story that teaches us all, if you want to change your destiny, you must learn to lead. That is the lesson. That is the truth. And that is why the world is watching India.